All right, so we are doing session 3 for lesson 9, and we're going to focus primarily on rounding decimals, and your IXL homework will be focused strictly on that as well. So let's get started with a warm-up. So we're going to have to use number lines here to show whether a number is going to be rounded up or rounded down, and we'll revisit those rules that determine what we're going to be doing with that. Except this time, instead of whole numbers, we will be involved with decimals. So let's get started with this one. So we have a number line here, and the number we're working with is 2 75 hundredths. So it wants us to round this to the nearest whole number, and the whole number in this case is a 2. So I know either that's going to stay the same as a 2, or it's going to round up all the way to a 3. And with these black lines here, those are called tick marks. They do have an official name for them. And I know this is 2, 2 and 1/10, 2 and 2/10, 2 and 3, 4. And this is a halfway point, 2 and 5/10. So that's important because we know with rounding, if a number is less than halfway between these two numbers we're rounding to, it will stay the same. Or if it's halfway or more, it'll go up. So we have to figure out where 2 and 75 hundredths would go. To the right of 2.5, this is 2.6, this is 2.7, this is 2.8. So technically, right here is our 2 and 75 hundredths. And what they want to know is if this number is going to round to 2 or to 3. Well, it's actually closer to this 3. So 2 and 75 hundredths would round up to 3. So that would give us our answer for that. So we'll be using number lines quite a bit for this lesson. So just be aware. All right, so open up to page 177. And like I said, we're going to be using a lot of number lines for this, so you will have to draw them. You don't have to draw them with a ruler or a straight edge or anything. Just draw some straight lines, and we'll work from that way. All right, so Tyson runs in a race at a track meet. One stopwatch shows his time as 11 and 25 hundredths seconds. Another stopwatch shows his time as 11 and 245,000 seconds. Round each time to the nearest tenth of a second. So before we get started, I want you to create a number line in your workbook. And the range is going to be 11 and 2/10 and 11 and 3/10. And I chose that range because the numbers here for his times that showed up on the stopwatches, those times are in between this 11 and 2/10 and 11 and 3/10. So we know those numbers are somewhere here. And in the very middle is 11 and 25 hundredths. That's going to be our midpoint. So let's look at these. So I've got, let's see, 11. And actually, our first stopwatch says 11 and 25 hundredths. That time would be here. And 11, and actually, let me put this here like that. Okay, that's this time. And this is this time. Okay, so it wants to round each of these to the nearest tenth of a second. So this time in blue, 11 and 25 hundredths is halfway between those. So this will round up. So beneath here, that will round to 11 and 3/10 seconds. This red dot here, which represents 11 and 245 thousandths, that is closer to this one. So 11 and 245 thousandths, that's going to round to 11 and 2/10 seconds. So again, you can look at that as a visual reminder of how that works for that. Okay. All right, so there's that one. turn the page, and it gives us our explanations again on what we just witnessed and what we did. So at the top here, you can place each number on a number line to see its relationship to nearby tenths. The nearby tenths are these two. So down here, 11 and 25 hundredths is exactly halfway between 11 and 2 tenths and 11 and 3 tenths. And you can locate 11 and 245 thousandths between these times. So it is less than halfway. So that's going to round down. Got nothing really to write in your notes, it just gives us an explanation. So place value charts can also be used for rounding and comparing the decimals. For this top chart here, we have this time right here that came up on the first stopwatch, and that's exactly between 11 and 2 tenths and 11 and 3 tenths. And the second stopwatch time is this one. But when you're rounding to the nearest tenth, you don't need to look at the thousandths place. We really only want to focus on the hundredths place to determine that. So that's why we don't really need to think about the thousandths place there. All right, let's answer some questions. Look at picture it and model it. Picture it is with the number lines, model it is with the place value charts. So why do the number lines and place value charts start at 11.2 and 11.3? Because the stopwatch numbers, both numbers, are between 11 and 2 tenths and 11 and 3 tenths. Number two, how do you know 11 and 25 hundredths is located at the halfway point between 11 and 2 tenths and 11 and 3 tenths? That is because there are the same number of tick marks. Again, the tick marks are those little black lines. Same number of tick marks to the left. Oops. Left and right of 11 and 25 hundredths. All right, what are 11 and 25 hundredths and 11 and 245 thousandths rounded to the nearest tenth? Simple enough. That equals, oops, 11 and 3 tenths, 11 and 245. That equals 11 and 2 tenths. So one thing I want to point out here, for those of you that don't want to do a number line or do a chart, when you're rounding to a nearest value, so this is nearest tenth, right? Here's the tenth place in both of those numbers. All you have to do for decimals is look to the number to the right to figure out whether that number in the tenths is going to go up and down. You've got a 5 here, which is exactly halfway. So that will raise that up to 11 and 3 tenths. You've got a 4 here that is less than halfway. So this 2 stays the same. So that's a quicker way to do it. Number 4, how do the place value charts help you see that 11 and 245 thousandths is closer to 11 and 2 tenths than to 11 and 3 tenths? Let me write this way. The digits are lined up by place value. That's how it's easier to see that. If you're rounding the nearest tenth, what place value do you look at to decide how to round to that number? I kind of just explained that in step 3. You look at the hundredths place. And that's why in the previous page, if you look at those charts again, it says it grays out the thousands place because that doesn't even factor in. You're looking at the place immediately to the right. In this case, it'd be the hundreds. Explain how you would round a decimal to the nearest hundredths. And this is just the general rule. If less than halfway, leave it. So more than or exactly halfway. Round up. Okay. I think with some practice with the IXL, you'll get the hang of that pretty quick. All right, so we're skipping the reflection here. Turn the page. Let's look at page 180. And these will go fairly quickly, and we're going to use number lines for these. Belinda paid $108.34 for groceries, rounded to the nearest dollar, which is the ones place, by the way, because if it was $10 or $100, we'd look at certain place values, but we're looking at underline nearest dollar and to the left or right, ones, the ones place. How much did Belinda pay for groceries? Show your work. Okay, so draw a number line with the two little arrows here. And the arrows represent that there are numbers to the farther to the right and left that we just aren't going to write down. But let's make nearest dollar, I know, is either going to be $108 or $109. And in between that is $108.50. It's the exact halfway point. So looking at how much she spent, $108.34. That's probably right about here, $108.34. And judging by the rules we've been talking about, that is less than halfway. So the nearest dollar will be $108. If she had spent $108.50, or more, she would have rounded up to 109. So there's that. Next problem. A dropper, and this is what you would pick up liquids with in chemistry. Any liquid and drop it. You can put drops on a plate to be used for chemistry or samples. So that's what that is. It holds 817 milliliter of fluid. What is this amount rounded to the nearest hundredth? Again, we're talking about the hundredths. Look at that one right there. That's a hundredths place. So for this number line, our range is either that's going to stay at that, or it's going to round up to that. And directly in the middle, 815. We got to bust out that thousandths place just to show that's exactly in the middle. All right, so if this is exactly the middle, and this is the number we're looking at, we know this is right about there. And by the rules, we know if it's more than halfway, it rounds up. So our answer is 82 hundredths. And last question. Which decimals have been rounded correctly to the nearest tenth? So pretty simple here. If it's nearest tenth, our answer has to only have the tenth value. This one, if you notice, that's the hundredths, so that's out. This is tenths place, so that works. This again rounds to the hundredths. This has a number in the tenths. And this one is rounded to, this is not rounded, this is rounded to the nearest tens. So that doesn't count either. Okay, so B and D are our answers for that. Okay, so let's see what we've learned with G8 for IXL. It's rounding decimals. Again, I think would work best here is just getting the hang of it, practicing. Remember, when it asks you to round to a certain place value, look at the number immediately to the right. And if it's halfway or greater than, you round up. If it's less than halfway, then you just keep it how it is. And good luck with that. Contact me with any questions.